with the time that we have left, I do want to ask you, and we'll obviously put the book, which I highly recommend, in our notes, the link to it, and it'll be promoted as well as part of our show. But speaking of Michigan, since you know that state, I imagine almost as well as you do any other state at this point in the United States, you've been spending a lot of time there this year as part of an attempt to understand how this crucial voting bloc in Michigan, other states as well, but particularly Michigan, which are Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, are thinking about the U.S. support for the role for the Israeli war in Gaza, for Israel in general, that has been supported basically limitlessly by Joe Biden and now by Kamala Harris. And I wonder if you could give us a sense for, there's a lot of talk about people who vote Democrat traditionally, who aren't going to vote for Democrats this time, who might vote for Democrats if they see something that they're unlikely to see, who might vote for Jill Stein. What is your sense, not just anecdotally, but if you could give us kind of a broader sense, given how much time you spent there, of what you've been hearing and what you think is likely to happen in those communities?
Yeah, so Michigan, I think, has a lot more cascading factors than Pennsylvania or Wisconsin. There is the Arab American community in Dearborn. There's also a decent Arab American population in the city of Detroit, in Flint. So people rightly focus on Dearborn because it's the largest, but there are decent Arab American population throughout Michigan. And I was just in Dearborn a few weeks ago after Kamala Harris, replaced Joe Biden. And the sentiment I was getting, and this was not from a few people, this was from quite a lot, was, your sympathy is not going to stop the bombs. And the most people I spoke to either were not voting in the presidential election or were looking into Jill Stein or Cornel West. And some of the top activists I spoke with talked about that people they know are not going to vote for Kamala Harris. Of course, this is not the entire Arab American population, but that was the sentiment I was getting, and polls that have come out since then seem to support that. Outside of the Gaza issue, I think Trump generally, in this evolution of 2016 to now, both on the national level and state level, but there's been a pattern of underpolling him, and for whatever reason, them missing his base by 1% to 2%. And I think that would apply to Michigan as well, because from what I'm seeing from interviews I did in Detroit, in particular, which traditionally, if a Democrat's going to win in Michigan, they have to do very well in Detroit. There's a not insignificant number of black men that seem to be moving over to Trump. Variety of reasons, but some of the men I spoke with, it was as simple as, prices were lower under Trump. Obviously there's context and different factors for that, but they're not political diehards, and they just look at it simply, costs were lower under Trump, and I'm tired of the high prices. Others had specifics. They liked the child tax credit under Biden-Harris, but that was only for a year, and they're mad it expired, which goes to kind of neoliberalism. Why would you create this program for a year and allow it to sunset without fighting for it, which President Biden
it's so interesting because you're talking to actual voters, black voters, Arab voters, or Muslim voters. And one of the things that always strikes me is this gigantic gap between sort of the elite pundits who are anointed, or the NGO leaders or group leaders who are anointed to speak on behalf of these people, and the huge gap between what they insist is important, the way the prism through which they see things, and the prism through which ordinary voters who aren't as politically connected, who don't work as political professionals, see things as well. And I think a lot of times people do forget, as they're watching the migration of black and Latino voters to the Republican Party, despite all these claims that Trump is a white supremacist, is that these people have the same exact concerns as everybody else, including white ordinary voters, which is they're worried about inflation, they're worried about healthcare costs, they're worried about the economy for their kids, and I don't know that they're so focused on these kind of racially divisive issues that oftentimes are emphasized by the elites who are self-anointed to speak for them. And we see that in polls, we see that in a lot of the journalism you're doing. Let me ask you the last question. I think part of the Biden-Harris strategy heading into the 2024 election, because remember now we're a full year into the war in Gaza, is they really assumed that the war would end before the election, so it would kind of be on the back burner, it would be out of people's minds, or at the very least they could pressure the Israelis to try and end it before the election, claim this kind of breakthrough that they did on behalf of the people in Gaza. I think they're still trying that. But I don't think they really care very much about what the Biden-Harris administration thinks. They've demonstrated that multiple times. I certainly don't think they care about their political prospects. In fact, they would love to probably see them lose, which is ironic since they've been so loyal to them. But leave that aside. Since this war does not seem to be ending anytime soon, certainly not before the election, and now we have things like an expanding war, this horrific attack today in Lebanon by Israel. Do you think that the more that kind of happens with Israel and its neighbors and these conflicts and wars, the worse this problem gets for Democrats when it comes to Muslim and Arab voters who had traditionally supported the party?
Yes. And I also think going back to black voters I spoke with, people also are just kind of sick of spending all this money everywhere else as their groceries are $200 for just a few items. I've spoken with so many, not just black voters, but all voters in Michigan and elsewhere who are like, why are we giving all this money to Ukraine and Israel and et cetera? But, you know, prices, gas is a little lower now, but it's been high. Groceries, I mean, housing, rent. So not just on the moral aspect, I think that train has left the station. I think if there was a ceasefire announced today, they would still lose a significant portion of the Arab American population, understandably so. I mean, I spoke with people in Dearborn that have lost 15 to 20 family members. But then on top of that, there's the financial and pocketbook issues of people are just sick of spending all this money and being told, you know, we have to do this to save democracy and the World Alliance, because they don't care about that. They care about food on the table. So I think if this continues, I think it could be the deciding issue, the defining issue that reelects Trump and defeats Harris.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, I think they're right to care more about the issues that affect them in their immediate neighborhoods and their lives and the lives of their children than some foreign wars overseas that they're told for some reason they have to pay for. Jordan, the book is We the Poison, Exposing the Flint Water Crisis Cover-Up and the Poisoning of 100,000 Americans. I think the thing I appreciate most about your book is that you are somebody who, despite whatever ideological views that you have, when it comes to your reporting, you just follow it wherever it goes, whosever doorstep it lands at. And I think that's what journalism is missing more than anything. And I think you do that extremely well. And I think, like I said, this book is kind of an insight, not just in the Flint water crisis, but to the problems with our U.S. political class in general. So congratulations on writing it, and thanks so much for coming on to talk about it. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for having me.
All right, have a good evening. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.